and welcome to the Body Smart Book Club, where we talk about the best of what we read. I'm Melody, we got Mark and Preston here with us, and today is our last episode. So I was waiting for you guys to cheer.
Bittersweet. I don't know what I'm supposed to be feeling right now.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. It's supposed to be bittersweet, right?
Yeah.
So one of us can be bitter and one of us can be sweet.
There we go.
Yeah.
So, yep, here we go. We're going to be talking about chapters 11. We're skipping over 12 and then chapter 13. Before we get going, Preston's going to tell us a little bit about how he's getting back into the base phase here. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so this chapter 11, is all about that base period.
All about that base.
Yes,
No.
all about the base.
Yeah.
And I am feeling that base right now. It is, I'm just tired all the time. And so I took a little bit of a break being in September, really most of September. I was just feeling really beat up and mentally just so fatigued of training through this year of the coronavirus and no races and running by yourself every single day. And it was just really weighing on me. So I took some time off, knowing that it would have some consequences on my training, and I would reset and rework myself back into that base phase. And now I am 3 weeks into that base phase and definitely feeling it. It's tough, but it's really important. And I know that getting that aerobic base and being able to build up the amount of mileage, amount of work I'm able to hold through these later phases into when I start doing more race-specific stuff will be super important. But it was super important for me in what I've done to have that transition period. It's been something that I kind of looked past in past training blocks, just because I felt like I'd always been like in this perpetual state of just training all the time. So a transition phase wasn't necessarily as important, but just making sure that, I was hitting that entire thing was pretty important for what I am working into right now.
Yeah.
That's great.
So it's, I like what you had said about, right, you starting that base phase and you're definitely a little bit more tired. Mm-hmm. And that hits at one of the points that they made early on in this chapter. So it's fun, kind of just what you said. So during much of the base period, you'll be a little too tired to perform at your best. This is why elite athletes build their base before the main competitive period, right? So just exactly what you said, right? Like, I need this time to kind of get back up to snuff so that when I do start competing, that I'm ready to go and I'm good to go. And so I think that's the thing, right? This base period is just like training in general, right? We're about overreaching bit by bit. But this one, right, is just kind of like a constant overreach. We're definitely getting those recovery periods in still, but it's going to be, it's just a lot of time on the road, a lot of miles, and just getting in that low intensity and just, hitting the road again and again and again, right?
Yep.
Well, and I have a question for you, and I think a lot of people are probably experiencing this right now, too, where they're starting to get back into running, but life is getting busier. The holidays are coming. Everyone's going back to work. The whole quarantine, coronavirus, no one's doing anything. Things are starting back up again, right? Yeah. So how are you balancing things that you have to do on top of getting all of your training in? I know you told me already that you eat a lot of Subway.
Yes. Melody and I were just talking before this about kind of my day-to-day schedule. And I leave my house at 7 or 8 in the morning, and I get back at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. It's just go, 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 go all day long. That hits it right on the head, and the fact that really, and my case is kind of extreme in the fact that I run twice a day and I run, more miles than the typical runner does. But I would say at least one of my runs every day, I'm there's always this conflict within myself. It's I could be getting this stuff done that I need to get done, or I could go get my run in. And I've kind of just realized that with every single run, every single workout, there's always going to be this choice of, do I want to kind of slack off today, or do I want to, dig in, get it done, and be productive? And so it really comes down to this self-mastery of just being able to prioritize what you need to get done and being productive with your time, because there's always going to be the opportunity to push it off. If you're looking for the excuses, if you're in that habit of finding the excuses, they're just always going to be there.
What about giving yourself breaks? Do you feel like that's important.
Yeah, I think breaks are super important. Obviously, that was kind of the premise for why I'm getting back into the base phase right now, and the fact that I took that time off to really allow myself to recover mentally and physically. But it's also become very important as I'm starting to build into this base phase because, like I said, I have just been like super tired and sore, and as it mentioned in the book, just really struggling to be performing at my best right now, which is totally okay for a base phase. It's more or less expected. But at the same time, it's had me reevaluate, every single day what I'm feeling and what I feel like I'm capable of that day. And some days, it comes down to, what, I think the best thing for my training today is to not do anything. And some days it's, okay, like, yes, you're sore. But digging down and actually getting that workout in is important. So, and it talks about that in the book as well, and the fact that you have to be very flexible when it comes to a training plan. Like, by all means, you should never write out what you're doing in a week or a month or a certain macro cycle and say, like, I'm following this to a T, because that's not gonna get you the best results, because you don't know how your body's going to respond as you go, and you might get sick, you might lose a night of sleep, get really busy at work, stressed out.
I heard like lose an eye, and I was like, wait, what? Lose a night of sleep. There you go.
Well, that would be pretty bad too.
Yeah,
it would be really tough to
lose
work
an eye,
out if you lose an eye.
That would be challenging.
So
that made me
it would take some adjustment. So
it definitely would.
Yeah.
But how cool would it be to be that like runner with the eye patch?
Oh yeah.
What would your name be though? What would your running name? The One-Eyed Wonder?
Captain Runner.
Captain Runner. There you have it.
Yes.
Feel free to, if you have any eye injuries, you can take that name. You're welcome.
You can take it.
I love it.
It made me think of last night. My husband and I were laying in bed, and I was searching through Instagram, and I found our 100-mile training plan.
Mm-hmm.
And it literally was like exactly what we were going to do for like 9 months of training every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't say anything. I just showed it to him, and he just started laughing. We were like, yeah, we were young and dumb back then.
Yeah, that is not what
we did not follow that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like the way that they did approach a training plan when they had these like examples here. They're very vague yet descriptive at the same time, which I liked because it does have a lot of room for changing it. And you'll have to take a look at these as well in your copy of the book, or we can zoom in on this one here.
Page 290 and 291 in the book.
Yeah, because it doesn't necessarily, do a day by day. It's more like week by week, what style of training you should be focusing on, whether it's like a base phase, whether it's more a specific week for that event you're doing, or if it's an intense week or recovery week. And then as well, how much volume you should be doing and how that progression should look. So it has a lot of room in there for, Monday of that week, I'm feeling really beat up and tired. I can dial it back, and then Tuesday, but I can still hit the goals that it has for that training plan, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just love that, like, it was kind of nice to see this, right? It gave several different examples, right? Like here's, maybe a more beginner level athlete. Here's a more advanced one. But I love that how it had like these ones, actual training plan, idealized plan, right? If everything went perfectly, this is what it could look like, but it's definitely not going to look like that.
Yeah.
Which I think is, it's nice to be able to kind of see an example of, if everything went right, looked like. But yeah, I mean, again, going back to having that flexibility. Like one of the things they mentioned in the book is you have like the scaffolding of this is what I want my year to look like, right? Like between preseason and the actual race season and postseason. But like in actually planning out what you're going to do the weeks, never really doing like more than a week or two in advance, right? Just because things plan, right? Like, yes, this is what we're going to do in this macro cycle. This is what we're going to do here. But like when I'm actually looking at my weeks, just being a little bit more fluid in the planning and not going, the 9 months out and having it all planned, but having an idea of what you want to do in each phase and then being able to modulate that week to week, I think is the important thing. And like, man, doesn't that just sound so much nicer, right? Like, I feel like that just gives more breathing room instead of like, oh my gosh,
you don't have to do it like this.
Right. And this is one thing that, it's funny, we were just talking about bagging on Mark Sisson, but this is one of the things that I know that I thought he did really well in the book, right? Is just this idea of fluidity and not having such a rigid schedule, and being okay with that, right? He said, if you like plan scheduled breaks into your season, right? Plan the play, plan the recreational things, and leave it more fluid so that you don't end up getting burnt out. Because I think that just like, that strict, rigid, I will not deviate from this plan even if it like kills me, right, is a perfect recipe for burnout. And so just that idea of going towards that goal, but still giving yourself some like breathing room, some chill room, some like thinking room, I think goes a long way. And in keeping with the spirit of why most of us are running anyway, right? It's not something that's supposed to, and we talked about this early, and I'm sure we'll get into it with the athlete story, but just like being able to keep the joy of running instead of it just becoming a tedious another have to do in our list of all these other things that we have to do.
Because why do it if it's horrible?
Yeah.
Why do it if you hate it? What's the point of it, right? Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about, like, I've been trying to get into a base phase 2 and come up with a new schedule. My schedule has gotten super, super crazy. Mark's laughing because he understands. Things are crazy right now. And I definitely have not been able to maintain what I was doing before. And it's been really frustrating. Something that I just realized, though, is basically what you just said, is that, okay, I don't have to weight train on Tuesdays and Thursdays because the book said those are the best days to weight train. What works best for my schedule is Mondays and Fridays. So that's what I'm trying to do. And maybe I'm not running as much as I used to, but I'm doing as much as I can with the time I have. And that's something that there's a time and season for everything. And I'm talking to all the average Joes out there who aren't elite runners, who can run all day, every day. And I'm not saying like...
Offense taken.
No. Different perspectives. We're all different people in different phases, doing different things, right? So to all you average Joes out there, don't beat yourself up because you're not running 12 hours a week like you used to. Maybe you just had a kid, or maybe you have kids and you only can run 6 hours a week right now. That's better than nothing. So just take what you can get right now and just trust that there's a time and season for everything, and you'll get to a place in your life where you maybe can get up to 12 hours a week again. So just love yourself. Be patient with yourself.
Well, I think that plays into one of the other things that the book talked about, right, is go for the low-hanging fruit and like building up from where you're at. They brought in the concept of like, it's so easy for us to want to work on our strengths, right? Like, because we're good at that. And it feels like, hey, I'm good at this,
easy,
right?
Yeah.
It feels super easy. You feel super good about yourself, right? Like, oh man, this just comes naturally to me. I'm like flowing, I'm jiving. Like, this is so awesome, right? Versus to kind of reflect and say, okay, what am I not so great at? And how can I improve on that? But the nice thing about that is that when we're focusing solely on our strengths, over time it becomes the law of diminishing returns, right? You're only getting so much, better at any given thing versus like those areas that we're weak. Like there's a lot of room to improve, right? There's a lot to learn. And so, for like myself as an example, right? I think I definitely fall into that kind of aerobic deficiency syndrome, right? So like I'm not at a place where I need to be really worried about how many high intensity sessions do I need to put into my week, right? Like for me, the low hanging fruit is like get out, get miles on, right? Spend time on your feet, get that duration, and do it again and again and again. And for me, right, like there's just this huge, like this huge gap that I can fill with just putting in that consistent work. And yeah, like, am I the greatest runner? Not by any means. I look like a rhino when I'm moving out there.
Rhinos are pretty fast.
No, that's
and really
true.
cool. So.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. I mean, I guess. But right, like there's because there's so much room for me to improve. Like that's actually a really cool thing, right? Like I can get, I can get a lot more out of just that consistent training than I can out of, I don't know, doing something else that I'm good at. But should have an example of things that I'm good at and things that I'm bad at. But that being said, I think just being able to like recognize what's difficult for you in running and that doesn't just have to be something that you accomplish on your own. Maybe ask a coach or a friend, like, hey, could you go and run with me, or could you give me some advice, or what do you think I can improve on? And just kind of crowdsourcing our weaknesses, right?
Yeah.
Like, people can help us point those out in a constructive way, and then we can dive into the training that'll be most effective to help us build those.
Yeah.
And that's why a coach is so important, because sometimes it is hard to see the weaknesses in ourselves, and a coach can, from the outside, can look at you and tell you what you need to work on. So we're running coaches.
Yeah, it's super easy to be biased as an athlete, to be like, I'm super great at this, I'm only going to do that. Whereas like you kind of need someone to like, okay, like, but you've got all this other stuff over here that you are terrible at. I'm sure they'd put it nicer than that, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it for the podcast. So.
Is this a Subway commentary? No.
No, but yeah, that's a really good point. It does talk about, I really like the quote, train your weaknesses and race your strengths. Mm-hmm. So if you're already really good at something, you're good at that, take it all the way on race day. But while you're training, run those long flat runs. That's what I got to do. I hate flat running. or climb those hills. Do the thing that you're not good at.
Yeah. That would be me. I don't like climbing.
It's fun. I thought the way that the book outlined kind of a way, we've talking about, that is not an actual phrase. We done talking about these things. I'm sorry for anyone who talks that way. Just ignore those last comments.
I think we're offending lots of people in this episode.
Well, there you go. It's going to happen one way or another.
Going out with a bang.
There you go. But, we've talking about, I just said it again. That's hilarious. That's going to be my new phrase. We've talking about. I love it. So the different ways that you can build your own training plan. But I love that this gave kind of the quick and dirty way to decide what's the best way to start about building that base period. Base period. I'm just going to be making all sorts of words up today. All right, like this idea of first, let's have a real assessment of where we're at as an athlete before we dive into that base phase. So they have category 1 and category 2. Category 1 includes the novice runner, right? Someone who's just started out running and figuring out, but also maybe someone who this past season just didn't go so well for them, right? They weren't performing at their best. Maybe they had a lot of injuries, or they just haven't been on their feet a lot recently. And the idea of maybe like, okay, if I'm taking honest assessment, maybe I'm here, versus the category 2, right? You're already well trained, and we're just going back into building that base phase to prepare you for the year. But one thing that we've been talking about again and again through these episodes is the idea of listening to your body, and that it's better to go a little bit short of your capacity rather than to overreach too far and find yourself with a setback. And so I think that's starting with that, like, okay, this honest assessment, where am I as an athlete? There's some of the assessments, like as far as the strength assessment and other things that go into detail in previous chapters to kind of give you an idea of where you're at. But they also talk about, have you been running this mileage? Or again, like I talked about, how was your last route, right? Did you really perform like your best? Like, what was it? They gave like little asterisks everywhere. Okay, so they said, so if you're, this is category 1, have not during the previous 12 months successfully completed races or events at the distance duration they're aiming for. The asterisk says, this means you performed well and you were happy with the results. You achieved or came close to the goals you had set for yourself, that you were satisfied. You were not, I love this part, you were not destroyed or injured by the event. It didn't just thrash you.
Destroyed is a very aggressive word. Not just injured, you were destroyed.
You were destroyed by that training season. But I think, right, like being able to be honest with ourselves and be like, okay, this is where I'm at, and be okay with starting where you're at. Right? Like that's a great place to build from. So yeah, I mean, I think that's really all for that chapter. Let's dive into chapter 13. So special considerations for mountain running. Sorry, my brain just broke for a second there. So special considerations for mountain running. Do you guys want to talk about some of your favorite parts of the chapter?
Yeah. So So Killian Jornet shares these recommendations, and this was our favorite part of the chapter. We'll just quickly go over a few of them. One of the things that he says is consider the stress of everyday life, and we've kind of talked about that. He talks about not overdoing it, so don't let the run destroy you. He says to be realistic about your goals and expectation. Stop and think about what are your priorities, what's happening in your life right now. He also says to be progressive.
Be progressive.
And he just reminds everyone, like, hey guys, I'm so awesome because I've been doing this since I'm a baby. Don't try to be like me. Just kidding. He's not arrogant like that. But don't try
to be like him.
Don't try to be like him. Yeah.
I mean, do, but just don't try to like
be progressive in it. Baby steps.
Yeah.
Don't just jump into.
Don't jump straight
like
to the 100-miler. He even talked about how like he wouldn't recommend himself to even go straight to a 100-miler. He worked his way up in distances and didn't just kind of dive in head first.
Yeah, I did that wrong.
But you survived.
We did.
It didn't
survive.
destroy
it
you.
Didn't destroy
Yes.
Yeah.
Not been destroyed by the train. Yeah, I know we've kind of spoken to this point before, but this idea of like Killian is just this amazing athlete who's really just, he's competitive with himself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, yeah, like, does he love to win the races, right? I think all of us love to win things, right? It feels good. But his life has been focused on this passion for running. And that's what's driven him, right? That's what drives him to do the kind of training that he does. And I mean, that's just the family life he grew up with, right? A love for being outdoors and for being physically active. And so I think that's probably part of his success too, is that he hasn't always looked at what everyone else is doing. He has, except in terms of like, well, what's the science of this, right? Like, what type of training plans are effective, given this context versus this context. But it seems like the focus has always been on how can I improve myself? How can I do something that I haven't done before? How can I stretch myself? And so I think that's one of the things to consider, is that I think we can go through a lot of grief trying to meet others' best and trying to meet, match the training plans of others in this, ill-advised way to try to become the best. I think if we're just constantly looking for how we can improve, being realistic about our weaknesses, our expectations, about the stresses that we have, but then just trying to always reach for our best without worrying so much about what other people are doing or what other people are accomplishing. I think that's a really great recipe for enjoyment and success in running, but really enjoyment and success in any area of our lives, right? That we're realistic about our situations, we push ourselves, and that we find joy in whatever we're doing, regardless of the circumstance. Anyway, that's my 2 bits about that.
It ties right into the athlete story at the end. Right before we dive into that, I just want to hit these last couple things that Killian said, just to finish it out. He said to prepare for the technicality, yes, of the course.
Words.
So try to run on a course similar to your, what does he call it? Your level A, your grade A, your priority race, right?
Yeah.
And then he says to train each element, and these elements include physical preparation, technical preparation, mental preparation, and gear. Gear is a huge deal, especially for mountain athletes who are on the mountain for, 20, 40 plus hours, right? That's important. And then he says, don't take it all too seriously, which ties into the last athlete story. Her name is Emily Forsberg, and she basically talks about how she got into mountain running because she just loved it. So she was a climber for a long time, and she was actually a little bit late into the game getting into running. She was, 22 years old when she started ultra running.
So old. No, I'm just kidding.
And she just fell in love with it. And the way she talks in this story is just awesome, because it's not like And then I was elite and I was winning all these races. And she was just like, whoa. And then all of a sudden I was elite and I was doing these races and like, whoa, I won. I can't believe I won. Like, this is just fun to me. And she ends by saying, for me, racing should be fun, but I won't sacrifice my health and happiness for it. So I feel like they put this story at the end for a reason, just to kind of say, none of this is worth it if you're not enjoying it. That's
Look
the
how
number
happy
one
she is.
most important
We
thing.
just have to point this out.
She just
Look at the smile.
they're
That's
just
like
as-
so happy.
the spirit about her. Like, she's just a happy person. It's awesome.
Yeah, I really like that they put this at the end. Like, in my mind, it's basically like, they give you all this science stuff like that, and they're like, but the most important thing is being happy. And so, like,
Yeah.
to me, like, the first 12 chapters of this book are all, teaching you the science. And then it's so you can make the best informed decisions about what you like to do and prioritizing what you're going to have in your training plan to not only be able to maintain enjoyment of the sport, but be able to get the most out of the things that you enjoy from the sport.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen, brother. Well, anything else that you guys want to say on our very last Uphill Athlete episode?
No, I think that's a great point to end on.
Yeah.
Right? Like, the science is important only insofar as it allows us to continue doing what we love.
Doing what we love.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. There's lots of ways to learn who you are and to learn about life. Running's just one of them. If this is something you're interested in, then awesome. If not, it's okay. Anyways.
I'll still judge you a little bit.
There we go.
Because running's amazing.
But for those of you that haven't checked out the book yet, great book. We highly recommend it. It's been for sure one of my favorite training books that I've read. Very, very goes into a lot of depth about a lot of the science and really taking advantage of those training days.
Yeah. Well, we'll end here with our sponsors. So shout out to the Oka to Stansbury Trail Series by Jimmy Thomas. Shout out to the Utah Running Shop. Shout out to the Wasatch Running Center. And, that's a new one, shout out to the Wasatch Running
Club! Yeah, Wasatch Running Club. Check us out on Facebook or on our website, wasatchrunningclub.com. Just great resource for runners to get together and enjoy the sport of running.
Thanks. Elmo schemes.
Yeah.
Thanks,